All right, Anatole, thank you for joining me today and speaking with my class.
Mm-hmm.
If you could just introduce yourself a little bit and what your role is here at Long Beach Water.
So I'm Anatole Falagan. I'm the Assistant General Manager for the Long Beach Water Department. Um, as Assistant General Manager, my primary focus has traditionally been in the area of finance, rate setting and budget and things like that. The administration aspect of the organization, touching upon human resources, policies and procedures for many people, safety, as well as all aspects of recruitment, and then also information technology. Uh, at the same time, because of my background, then a lot of my focus has been also on water resources and water resources planning, which is critical to the agency itself. So that kind of encompasses my broad span. The education background that I have in order to do those things, I have my bachelor's degree in civil engineering. I have a master's degree in civil engineering. And then later on in life, I got a master's in business administration. And the master's in business administration was really critical to me in terms of being able to kind of shift out of engineering and do some of the things related to finance and business and HR and rate setting and so forth. I've been working in water now for almost 34 years. Yes, almost 34 years. Starting for 6 years, I was working in the private sector in Texas, doing flood control and floodplain management work, and design plans for construction. And then I came back to California and I worked for 16 years in Metropolitan Water District, which is the wholesaler for Southern California. Most of the imported water that you see that comes into Southern California comes through the Metropolitan Water District. I was still an engineer when I started with them, and so I was doing a lot of design work. I was designing several major large infrastructure projects that were going to construction. During my career at Metropolitan, I shifted to water resources planning, and then ultimately got promoted into executive management. So I was in the executive management team for the Metropolitan Water District. In 2005, I came over to Long Beach. That was the big shift because I went out of generally water resources engineering and I moved into the finance and business side of things. And I've been at Long Beach Water Department since 2005. Doing everything, including water conservation these days as well.
That's great. And you said you came back to California, so you originally grew up here?
Yes, I'm an Orange County native. I was born in Orange, California, where if people are familiar with the Orange County area, the block at Orange and the outlets was originally nothing but a big strawberry field. And there was a little tiny freeway called the 22 freeway. So, yes, I'm an Orange County native as well.
So do you remember droughts or water conservation efforts growing up?
I don't, which is an interesting perspective the way you asked that question. I left Orange County when I was 10 years old, and I was abroad in areas that had plenty of water in the tropics. I didn't really experience drought. I did come face to face with drought when I visited and came back for college. So I came back, and one of the major California droughts had hit, the largest single year drought, so it was 1977, had hit. And I distinctly remember kind of the unease that was going on throughout my family that lives in Orange County.
Yeah.
And it was, I think at the time, it was in the city of Anaheim, was what's your house address? And so depending if your house address was odd or even, then you were allowed to water or not allowed to water. And lawns were going brown, people were stressed out, and the aspect of conservation was everybody needs to immediately stop using water, was basically it. And then I again went to college in Northern California. Not too much discussion of drought there, but when I came back to Southern California to work for Metropolitan, I came back to work for Metropolitan at the beginning of the drought of the early 90s.
Yes.
And so during my tenure at Metropolitan, I went through at least 3 drought cycles with them.
Wow.
And kind of the efforts that
Yeah.
we were trying to do in the region to continually try to conserve and try to find new ways to get the people to conserve.
It's interesting. I remember the drought of the 90s very clearly, having been, I was fairly young at that point, and that's, I just definitely remember things like if it's yellow, let it mellow. I mean, from the time that I was a 5-year-old
Yes.
kid. So, all right. Let's talk a little bit about water conservation and how that fits into Long Beach's water supply portfolio.
Okay. I think it's insightful to talk about the 90s.
Yes.
Because the 90s began shaping how we view water conservation today. So initially, both like I shared with you, experience in the 70s, and then this experience with drought in the 90s going forward, all of a sudden there was this discussion of water conservation as simply something that you needed to do dramatically all of a sudden to stop using water. And anything, whether it was advertisements or the things that you would do indoors, everything was under the concept of how can I stop using it. But I think it's important because the 90s are important because the 90s going forward began to shape a new view of conservation as a resource. That if you could actually start having measurable effects, whether it's because you're changing plumbing codes, you're having new types of washing machines, new types of toilets, new types of faucets, and so on and so forth, you're starting now to characterize going forward, you need to put these things in place because they will actually generate water savings or water that you can measure. And all of a sudden the planners from the early 90s going forward started saying, okay, so I'm going to count on conservation to do this much for me. And when you start taking that approach, then all of a sudden it becomes a resource. And now you start putting it into your plans and say, no, this resource, conservation, has to do this much, right? And now what am I going to do to make that happen? I'm going to change toilets, change this, change washing machines, change outdoor landscaping, change outdoor irrigation practices, change outdoor timers, sprinkler heads, and all these things, and it will give me this. So, for us in Long Beach, that pattern indeed for Long Beach dates back to the 90s. Long Beach has been engaged, like many agencies in conservation, all the way since that. And it has had measurable effects every single step of the way, to the point that now we get to say that the water we're using today is at a level similar to the 1960s.
Wow.
And measurably, conservation has a lot to do with that. A lot.
That's impressive. So Long Beach hasn't really had to go out and seek new supply. We're not building a desal facility
Right.
or anything like that because we have conservation as a supply.
Yeah, that's a really important piece. So let's take that comment and kind of build on that comment because I think it's very insightful. So if you think about, if I think about when I came to Long Beach in 2005, our demand was somewhere in the neighborhood of 70,000 acre feet a year. 70,000 acre feet a year was our demand. At the height of this last drought that we just came out of, where the state was mandating us to cut back to a certain percentage, so for that effect, let's go to that, we were in the low 50s, right? So I would say for purposes of this exercise I'm doing with you here, almost 20,000 acre feet difference in demand. And since 2005, Long Beach's population has simply grown. Not a lot, but it has grown, right?
Absolutely.
So it goes back to what the conversation we were having, that conservation is a resource. And you're doing that in your resource plans. Because if I think about it that way, then I've approached conservation as a resource, and this resource has given me essentially almost the amount of an entire seawater desal plant.
Wow.
And if I think about how the costs are, cost of seawater desal is incredibly expensive. I simply haven't spent that kind of money to generate this kind of savings, right? And so I've saved myself and the community and the ratepayers billions of dollars over time.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt, right? So that's very important. And I think, for us going forward, we'll continue to view conservation that way. We don't have any intention of, with conservation as a resource, we don't have any intention of going back for the population we have today on a per capita basis we don't have any intention of going back to the days of 70,000 acre feet of demand for the population we have today. We're just counting on conservation delivering that going forward. Because without these efforts that we have made, it would be very difficult to live in this new normal that's being created by the state of California in terms of conservation restrictions that they're putting in place.
Okay, so a little bit more about those restrictions. We just, have sort of come out of a big drought where, who knows, potentially going to head into another one sooner than later. Feel like we're always on the edge of drought if we're not actually in one. So this last drought, the governor came out and actually had mandates that he put out there for the public. We had our own restrictions and just programs in general. It wasn't all about restricting. Could you talk a little bit about Long Beach in the last drought?
Yeah, the last drought hit us at a time where we were already engaged in trying to reshape the community's understanding of water conservation as a resource. In 2007, before this latest drought hit, so way back, in 2007, the state was already facing issues with endangered species in the Delta. And so the state itself was restricting the delivery of imported water to Southern California. So as an agency, we had the foresight in 2007 to start changing the way that we used water, that our customers use water. So we were doing messaging, we were doing, trying to get people comfortable with watering only certain days of the week. We were putting in place certain restrictions. We didn't want to see water running off into the streets anymore. We didn't want to see you washing your car without a pressure nozzle, no hosing down driveways. All these things, we were doing them in 2007 without any particular need. There was no drought at the time. So the state mandates came forward now in 2014, 2015, and we were already doing all this conservation that benefited us in a way, because the public had already reduced by a significant amount and made it easier to hit the state restrictions. Going forward, the state has come forward and said these restrictions now are permanent. So what we should expect from the state is pretty much consistent with the things that we've been trying to create in Long Beach, which is we're trying to create a new normal, a new approach to using water, and in the hopes that we get away from this aspect of, I wish I could go back to doing what I was doing before, when it's clear that the state is going to say, no way, this is the new normal going forward. And in fact, in the state's words, conservation is a way of life.
I think that's fabulous, but it is a challenge maybe to get our customers to view that as fabulous. We don't want them to feel, I think, a sense of loss, like you're saying, that they want to go back to what they were doing before, like that was somehow better. So how do we deal with that?
Well, the way that we deal with that going forward is, at least for Long Beach, is we're trying to get people comfortable with almost like a subconscious way of thinking about water. Southern California's experience with drought has been this constant aspect of there's a crisis and I need you to do something now. And in that message, there's a belief that if you only do this for me now, then once the crisis is over, then what I'm asking you to do can stop. The state is changing that dynamic, and I'm not sure that people are really in tune with that. And the state is changing the dynamic and saying, no, it's crisis forever. I'm not going to let you go back to what you were doing before. I think that can cause a lot of stress in people because they're not really in tune with something that told them is a restriction, but now the restrictions are never going to change. Our approach in Long Beach has been to take this approach to water use as opposed to conservation. And we want to get more into kind of like an identity of water use, where if you use water wisely, you're doing your best to keep your water use down indoors, you're doing your very best to keep your water use down outdoors as well, or even your businesses are running water a particular way, then that's more like a culture, an identity, or a lifestyle. And if we can work with the public to understand that this lifestyle is enjoyable, there's no harm to the quality of life, and it's actually attractive, that you actually enjoy it, then maybe that attractiveness would want you to emulate it, would make you want to try this and want to say, hey, I'm just like everybody else. I'm part of the new trend, right? And then in the hopes that way, then we get out of this discussion of, hey, I'm sorry to tell you that the restrictions, they're going to be that way forever. Just in telling you what I just said, you can see there's two different ways to go about this. And in Long Beach, we're choosing to go more towards lifestyle.
That's really interesting. So your marketing these days does kind of shy away from the word conservation, and you're, like you said, trying to sort of instigate an entire change in the way that people use water.
Yeah.
Long term.
Yeah. So we do have, I don't want to oversell it. I mean, we do have the programs. We have landscape retrofit programs. We have incentives for all kinds of devices, whether it's your indoor devices, toilets, washing machines, dishwashers, so forth. Even restaurants. We have a really successful program right now where we're going into the restaurants and helping them identify all the different devices that use water, and can we give them incentives or rebates to get them to change those devices. There's all of that still goes on. I think what we've done in Long Beach is that we've added another component, like you said, which is more lifestyle. So part of my effort here has been to bring this message to consumers through artists, through music, arts, partnerships in the community that are just more lifestyle partnerships, whether it's festivals that people have on various occasions or various celebrations. We want to be there promoting a particular attitude or particular approach to using water, and it kind of embeds water use in that subconscious part of your mind, because it's no longer because you read it in the paper, it's because the water department is engaged in different aspects of your life, talking to you about, hey, this is a lifestyle. Whether it's an artist that you really like and the paintings that they like to do, and that artist tells you that they also are committed to the environment and committed to water. Musicians tell you, some of your key people that you admire, your local leaders, they tell you they're committed as well. This begins to surround you as, and Long Beach benefits because Long Beach has an identity as a city. It begins to surround you that, if I'm in this city, this is the way that I need to behave. This is the way that I need to be. This is the lifestyle that I've bought into by living in this city. And then that's an entire change from how we viewed conservation in the past.
I think it's very strategic that you've sort of tuned into the arts, music, sort of community event scene, because, like you said, Long Beach does have an identity, and I think we have an identity as a community that cares about arts. So I think that's something that we've done very well so far. Are there any programs that you see coming up in the future that haven't been started yet?
I think one of the things that we're going to try to continue to do is I'm going to try to continue to bring an emphasis on habit and behavior modification. And what I mean by that is that I can have, for a community, we can have all these programs. And we can have the messaging out there as well. There can be all kinds of campaigns. I think where I'm coming from is that you have to design it and approach it in a particular way that you really do want to get a person to change their approach and outlook, which in the end is their habits. So I've said many a time that you can put all the washing machines in the world in someone's home, and you can put all the toilets, you can tell the restaurants to do things a particular way, and they might inherently believe it, but habits are an incredibly powerful thing. We experience them in our lives all the time, including habits that we don't like, right? And we do something, we go, oh gosh darn, I can't believe I did that. Why did I do that? I don't want to do that, but I keep doing it, right? Habits are incredibly powerful. So one of the things that we can do, a good example, is what we started doing with our restaurant program. Because if you think about it, what we've done with the restaurant program is before, in the past, we had all this money for devices. And so you could go to a restaurant and say, I want you to change out your washing machine, make sure your bathroom's a particular way, and I have so much money to give you. But in the end, it wasn't really the right amount of money. There wasn't any big cost savings to the restaurant. And so what we did then is we actually changed it. And so we now have a program that actually goes like this with the restaurant. And that is to tell them, if you do these things for me, if you buy into changing out the washing machine, the spray nozzle, and all these things in your kitchen, the bathroom, and so forth, then we will be able to do something that the restaurant really, really wants. And that's advertisement. So if we can have a collection of things that the restaurant is willing to do, then we'll give them a certification. And it's not just any certification, it's a certification then we promote on social media and advertisements, and we say, look, this restaurant is a certified blue restaurant. You should go eat at this restaurant,
Okay.
right? And we have been successful in doing that. We have about 20 restaurants that have signed on recently, and we've actively promoted them. We have social media, video, and things like that. And so then that begins to spill out, and that's the hope that we have. So that advertisement then gets people to come to the restaurant, and they're coming to the restaurant because it's a certified blue restaurant, and there is a certain attitude and belief that they themselves, the customers, are buying into this aspect of water use going forward, right? It's kind of like a lifestyle. And so as you want to be part of this lifestyle, then hopefully your habits start changing. And if you are willing to go to these restaurants because we advertise them as certified blue, then that spills out into your home, the way you use water in your home, the way you use water outdoors. And now we really are starting to head into this lifestyle that we want you to adopt. And you really want to believe in it, and you believe in it because you go to these restaurants, you do things this way. And to me, that's kind of like the wave of where we want to use water conservation going forward, right? Particularly for Long Beach, we want to be there. And then hopefully, if these programs are successful, one of the things about Long Beach as its identity is also to be innovative. And my hope is that Southern California will begin to adopt this attitude and approach to water conservation as well.
That's excellent. I hope that, all of Southern California starts to view water conservation this way. Thank you for spending this time. You'd be amazed how many times you say when I close caption. I have to type all that out.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you, Anatole, for spending some time with us. I appreciate you speaking with my class. Do you have any final thoughts about water conservation?
I think that the future is bright for water conservation overall, and no matter where you are involved in it. So there's plenty to do here in Southern California. I enjoyed speaking with you as well.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.